to the Horror Academic. Today we are actually going to talk about my favorite horror film of all time. I know that can be a little confusing. I say that I think every film that we've talked about so far, and most of the ones we're going to talk about in the future, I'll refer to as my favorites. But, I mean, I have a lot of films I love. But there's one horror film that stands above the crop for me. That's absolutely the best. For many reasons we'll discuss. But to me, the best horror film of all time is also the best zombie film ever made and the best horror film that George Romero ever made. And that is Day of the Dead. So you're going to have some questions for me, right? Well, first off, you're probably going to say, we already talked about Night of the Living Dead. Wasn't that your favorite horror film? Wasn't that your favorite zombie Romero film? Actually, no. It's an amazing, important film. It is a groundbreaking film. It is a monumental movie that has changed filmmaking for everything that came after, but not my favorite horror film. Not my favorite Romero film. It's definitely an early work. You can see them learning how to tell a story. Like, here's people who were used to using film as a medium to sell products or to give you news or to kind of give information, but to tell a story, this was new. And obviously it was also new to them that, wait, it's a horror film, we have to do makeup and it has to look real and all these things that they were figuring out as they went along. So no, I'm not going to say it's my favorite because I think it's very much a part of the process of him coming to excellence. And then you're going to say, hey, wait a minute, how are we going to go from Night of the Living Dead to Day of the Dead? We're not going to talk about Dawn of the Dead? Okay, Dawn of the Dead, really important movie. We're not going to talk about it yet because I know that there's a special edition in the works right now that will probably surpass the one I already own, so I'm going to hold off. Don't be too angry at me. I'm going to hold off on talking about Dawn. And to be honest, I will completely confess this. When I first watched Dawn of the Dead, I was not a huge fan. There's things about that film that didn't grab me the first time I watched it. Oh, I love the beginning. I love the setup, understanding where the world is at already with the zombie apocalypse and how deep we are in. I love all of that. I love the characters. But the movie takes a weird turn for me in how comedic it is, especially when the bikers break in and it goes from them looting to them having a pie fight. Okay, that was rough for me as a kid to be all in on. I liked my horror serious. I had come from a sci-fi background, and the best sci-fi to me was the serious sci-fi, so coming into horror, and perhaps that's why I grabbed onto Night of the Living Dead, was because of a very bleak and like very serious film. Dawn of the Dead gets silly, and it took me a long time to appreciate that. I mean, I was probably in my 20s when I finally was like, you know what, okay, it's alright that there's a funny moment, or a long funny moment in this movie as opposed to a couple of small moments. And I think perhaps years of movies like Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness, and even Reanimator, kind of helped me understand horror and comedy mixing together better. Because there's definitely moments where I love that, but it was so strange to me that it was this abrupt shift within such a seriously toned film. So I had a hard time with Dawn because of that. And I know a lot of people are going to say that that's crazy, and Dawn's, a masterpiece and all that. And I understand that, and I appreciate Dawn for everything it is and what it became and did, and how it launched things for things like Savini's work. And, I mean, it's a really important movie. And as somebody who makes, not daily but regular trips to the mall to kind of pay homage to the world that I worship, I really appreciate that, and I get giddy when I get to the mall and all that. But we will talk about Dawn of the Dead, like I said, when that special edition comes out, and whichever one it is that I decide to purchase, then we'll discuss that edition. But why is Day of the Dead my favorite? And why is Day of the Dead an important horror film? It's a third part in a trilogy. Especially now that it no longer is a trilogy. And I think a lot of us tend to forget, or choose to forget, that there is essentially a second trilogy that happens long after Day is over. And that's part of the history of these films. And it is part of the story, and it is a reboot of sorts. But why is Day important? The third part. to me, and like I said, particularly when I found it and when I was a teenager first getting into these films, serious horror was what I loved. And dark, like I say, depressing, this bleak outlook on life. We just talked about The Thing in the last episode. You want a bleak movie. It doesn't get more bleak than being stuck in the middle of Antarctica. But what is about Day that I love is it's this combination of concepts of who would still be alive. You're very deep into the zombie apocalypse by now. It's been years. At least months, I'm gonna say years. And we have left a small band of scientists that are still trying to figure out A, what caused this, B, can we stop it, and C, is there a cure? Or is there like an antivirus? Is there a way to stop it from continuing? So you have these three scientists that are left. And then you have the military. And perhaps part of what I embrace so much about this is that struggle between the two groups. And this military of what's left of the military. These are not the shining heroes that we would hope would be the army that saves us at the end of the world. These guys are a pack of losers. And they're ornery, they're foul-mouthed, they're nasty, they're mean, and they're trapped in here with the three people who are still trying to save us. And at this point, we don't know. Is there anybody else left in the world? Is this it? Is this all that's left? Is this small compound in this tropical Florida location, this fictitious place within the film? It probably is. If there's others, they don't know how to contact them. They've been out of contact for a long time. And that struggle of these two warring groups trying to stay alive, trying to feel useful in what's left of this bleak society, that really appealed to me. And what else really appealed to me was the character of Sarah, played by Laurie Cardell. Now, I will say that she is one of my true heroes. When I was growing up, when I was a teenager, early 20s, watching these films, I really appreciated Laurie Cardell's acting in this, her portrayal of Sarah. She is a scientist, forced to be a leader amongst this small group, fighting off the military and keeping them at bay. Because these guys are ready. They're like, why are we even still stuck in this place? Why are we having to help you guys who haven't done a damn thing? And what do we get out of this? And why don't we just get the hell out of here? And she knows tensions are getting harder and harder and worse, and the conditions are getting worse, and they're running low on food, they're running low on water, they all these typical end of the world scenario things, but it's tempers flaring, and these differences of opinion. There's this, it's worth staying alive, it's worth still working towards a cure or understanding this better, versus, let's just grab our guns and blow our way out of here and get someplace else. There's little hints of things that we see in Dawn that come to fruition sort of in Day. There's the scene in Dawn of the Dead where they're on the docks, and the band of heroes are taking one of the helicopters from the television station. And you have cops, SWAT team, probably some other like National Guard or something mattered in there. And they're all just grabbing whatever they can find and jumping in a boat, jumping in a helicopter and getting the hell out. But where to? Right? So that's the big thing about Dawn of the Dead, is you end up holed up in a mall, because where else are you going to go? You really can't go anywhere. You don't have any idea that is it so bad that there's nothing left to go to? So take that little seed that you see in Dawn of the Dead and then give it some time. 10 years have passed in the film world, and see how bad it has gotten. So they're stuck in a cave. And this cave is all that's left. They make periodic trips above ground to try to look for survivors and to wrangle up some of the dead because they keep them penned up. Why do they keep them penned up? You got the Dr. Frankenstein character. This guy is still performing experiments. Behavioral experiments, biological experiments, to try to see what can happen. Can we train them? Can we cut them off? Is there an easier way to destroy them? But he really goes off the deep end and focuses on this concept of domesticizing them and what can come from, okay, well, there's more of them than us, so what if we can convince them to work for us? What if we convince them that they should be here for us, not against us? And you have John Amplis's character and Laurie Cardill's characters still on a very scientific route, still doing blood tests, still trying to determine bacteria or viral infections. But it is this other approach that is starting to kind of tear things away. And it crumbles the illusion of what they are still trying to do. He's doing tests to prove things that they already kind of knew and things that have been proven in the past. These kind of morbid surgeries that he's doing to prove, what's left of the actual working, functioning parts of a zombie. And that's why they have to keep going up and grabbing them. And when they realize that this is what they're risking their lives for, when the military guys realize this is what I'm risking my life for, so that you can take it apart but what are you doing that's useful? Is that going to solve anything? Is that going to lead to anything? And that's a real big part of the breakdown. There's also the fact that whoever had been in charge has died. And who's left is Rhodes. And Rhodes is mean, and he is Sarah's foil. He's the guy who says, what the hell are we still doing here? Let's get the hell out. I don't care if we don't have new orders, but I'm telling you what our orders are now. And what's going to stop me from gunning down those scientists so that there's no reason left for me to be here? And I'm going to get out of Dodge. And he really lays it out that there's no more purpose in the military guys risking their necks for the scientists, because they're not doing anything. They've been down here long enough. Nothing's been proven. There's no gain from it. Let's get out of here. And in a way, kind of like Harry Cooper in Night of the Living Dead, he's not completely wrong. Why are they still forcing themselves to stay down here if they're not coming up with anything? Perhaps it is time to find a way out. So there are two more characters in the film. So you have Rhodes, you have Steele, and you have three or four other guys who are still representing the military. So these two characters that are left kind of in the middle, they are not part of either group. They remain neutral. They are sweetened. They have particular tasks that they are there for and do not reside on either camp. Physically either. They do not bunk with either group. So that's John and McDermott are the characters. And John's helicopter pilot, McDermott's the kind of communications tech, and they are there purely to offer their services. They have been drafted into this in some way, which is kind of unclear because we know that they're not military. They're kind of like third-party contractors who are stuck in this mess. And, so their job is to see, can we communicate with outside folks? Is there any survivors that we needed to kind of find, be it by searching by air or by sending out messages, or to communicate with whatever control or be it the DC or whoever is there who had been giving them orders. So they're stuck in the middle on this. And they try to stay out of all of the politics. They have no want or desire to be part of it. And they add an understanding. They have the ability to step back and say, all of this, these fights that are going on between you groups, useless. And what's really important will come through, will show through. And that is survive. Find your way to survive. And they were just there to help facilitate that for them. And there's an excellent scene where they take Sarah in for a moment and they talk to her about why are you fighting? Why we shouldn't be, we're past this, right? There's not enough of us left to war with each other. We should be taking what's left, what's worth keeping of society, find an island in the middle of nowhere, and just start over. Be Adam and Eve. Start again. And there's a sense of hope in those characters and in their complete lack of desire to be part of this fight. But they still want to survive. And I think, and this is to me what Romero does best in all of his films, regardless of genre, is the film becomes about the struggle between characters. And the zombies, as extraordinary as they are made, and these are some of the best zombies you will ever see. Some of the best gore effects you will ever see. This is Savini at the top of his game with a crew made up of the people who will become all of the effects crews after him. You have K&B Effects is in there. You have guys who end up working on the greatest effects that happen after this film. And it's a harvesting ground for knowledge on how to do these things. And they really do an amazing job. But, and this is what's important in Romero films, those zombies are secondary. They are not the conflict. Just like Harry Cooper in Night of the Living Dead, the conflict is interpersonal. It's dividing people for whatever way and reason. In Night of the Living Dead, my personal way of dissecting the film is it's a clash between age and class. And many people look at it from the perspective that it is a racial divide. And that is why we're clashing. That is why we don't have the ability to work together. In Dawn of the Dead, you have the survivors banding together, but they still end up in conflict with all these other groups. You have the militias that they're trying to get away from. You have the bikers who come to take their thing that they didn't really own. They just took it themselves. But in this film, it's boiled down, cut and dry in so many ways when you look at science versus military. But you feel like Romero is those two guys in the middle. It's like, screw you all. I don't care about your politics. I don't care about you trying to tear each other apart to say whose theory is the best theory. It's all about staying alive. And it's all about saying, can't we just get along, right? To me, Romero is that character of John. He's the one sitting there going, while you're all fighting and the world's coming to an end outside, we're sitting in a cave that happened to be the archive of all the movies that Hollywood made. There's archives of books, literature. Why aren't we sitting here taking that in instead of sitting here fighting in our last moments? And that to me is what's amazing about Day of the Dead, is it's the culmination of Romero's ability to talk about interpersonal struggles and how we as a people just can't get along. And it's to me also one of the best metaphors that he's created for himself. Not the best. We will talk about Night Riders, which is my favorite film of his that is not a horror film, and how that is him telling his story in his own way. But today, we talk about his best horror, Day of the Dead. So, argue with me if you like. Tell me Dawn is better. Tell me Night is better. Um, be the oddball who thinks Diary is better, or Survival, or Land. Nothing against those. Those are good movies, but I've yet to hear anyone say that any of those second trilogy of films is better than the first. But argue with me if you want, but it's my show, and I'm going to tell you that Day of the Dead is probably his crowning horror achievement. So that's why it's important to me. It is the culmination of all of his work until that moment, and it is the greatest zombie film ever made. So I've given you my reasoning why I think Day of the Dead is a great film. I mean, everything from Joe Pilato being torn apart physically by zombies and screaming at them, and so insane. Didn't even mention Bub, the intelligent zombie who essentially leads the army of the dead to fight back at the end, who evolves into the concept of Big Daddy in Land of the Dead. Like I said, Laurie Cardille. Sarah is, to me, the Ripley of Alien, the Sarah Connor of Terminator. Those three roles, I think, should all be spoken together more often. I think this is, in many ways, unfortunately, a forgotten role. In terms of how we remember women in horror, and I think she is the strongest woman in horror, because there's moments when she isn't, and she's vulnerable, and she's a regular person, and that's important to show that she has to put on this facade of being just as tough as these nasty military men, and she has moments that we get to see her break down, and there's a reality to that I think Romero is amazing at showing, and he does a great job of bringing that out of his actors. And I think Laurie Cardille excels because of that. Yeah, this is just a stellar film with some of the best effects ever made, and one of the greatest locations that you could think of. It literally is a mine that has been hollowed out and used as storage that they've rented to make it into this military outpost. And the horrifying stories of essentially living there for the months that it took them to make the film, and how it affected everyone. I mean, many horror film actors will talk about having to swap day for night in their living conditions, because you shoot all night to take advantage of the evening conditions outside, so that it's darkness at all times. But filming in the mines was even worse than that. On top of it, you have filming in the mines in the winter. So, I mean, it's just people getting sick left and right. It's horror stories of creating this masterpiece of horror. Unfortunately, to me, this is the saddest part of this story, is that it was not well received. Many people were unhappy with the film when it came out, because it was not Dawn of the Dead Part 2. It did not have that kind of sense of humor about it. It didn't have the fun, action-y aspects of Dawn were missing, because it's such tight locations. You really don't have, you know, those wonderful moments of running around the big, huge Monroeville Mall taking out zombies. So the fact that it doesn't have that action flair, the humor flair, and it boils itself down to this raw, nasty existence, did not go over well at first. To the point that even Romero fought to keep it unrated, which means it had a limited theatrical run, because only certain places would play it. On top of that, only certain places would even advertise it. So it had a rough time getting seen. And I don't think it would have been remembered were it not for the advent of video. Video stores everywhere carried it, and I think that is where the film found its real audience. I mean, there are a few who were diehard from get-go and appreciated what was happening. Romero always speaks about how, with the Dead trilogy, each film represents the decade it comes from. So you see the 60s and Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, the advent of commercialism is quite clear. Reaganism in the late 70s. And Day of the Dead has this horrible kind of unable to see past what we have created, what we're stuck in, feeling of the 80s. And that's, you know, when you're living in that time, I could see that that would be tough to take. So yeah, when it came to video, it found its own audience, and it really started to find people then. I've heard Romero on many occasions had talked about the fans of the films and how, you know, you have the old school who love Night, you have the real fun and gore folks who love Dawn, and then he used to refer to those of us who love Day as the real ghouls because we loved the bleak nastiness and the real over the top, you know, epic proportion gore of Day. And I think part of him kind of resonated with us and appreciated those of us who would tell him how much we loved the film and how to us it was the best. And he had such a hard time. Of course, I'm not even mentioning the fact at this point that, sorry that I didn't start this way, but he had a much more epic story in mind originally, and the screenplay he had written was going to take place kind of in the bayou, and you know, it was beyond what he could afford. It was beyond necessarily what would get financed, and he had basically been given boundaries that he had to rework within. And knowing they weren't going to be able to film in swamps all over Florida, even though they did scout and look for these places, it was decided, okay, well, we'll just use a little bit of Florida. And that's the little glimpses that you see. I believe those were Fort Myers, Florida. And the rest of the story, we're going to have to find a single location, much like we did with the mall in Dawn. So he agrees. He trims the story down to its bare bones, and that's what we get. Many people also went into it knowing that it was supposed to be something much grander, and perhaps held that against what they saw. But there is a bit of an adage in independent film, and even in genre film, that it is when you are given more limitations that you learn to be more creative. And the smaller the budget, perhaps you will create the more interesting story. So that's what I find in this. Okay, so you want to see the collection, right? Day of the Dead, the Laserdisc is a beautiful cleaned up edition, sounds great, looks great, all that stuff. And you have, you know, Nicotero and Savini providing behind the scenes footage and a bit of a video journal of creating the film and living in the mines. So I highly recommend if you're a Laserdisc collector. I mean, to me it is all about the trilogy. Night, Dawn, and Day are probably the most autographed discs that I own, and this is because of how much I love these films. And I mean, as you can see, Day is perfect for it. After that, we had a couple of DVD editions. So Anchor Bay first put out this edition, which has essentially the things that were on the Laserdisc, behind the scenes footage. There's a small, I think there's a small featurette, but it's not listed here. Theatrical trailer, all that, widescreen. But I mean, this is pretty much if you didn't have a Laserdisc, this is the next best thing. And you know, when Anchor Bay first got the rights to put these films out, this was the first edition they made. A few years later, though, you get this special edition from Anchor Bay, which is quite nice, has lots of great features, has a weird cover where you can kind of open up, go from Bub to Frankenstein here. Let's see, you have commentaries with Romero, Savini, production director Cletus Anderson, who did pass away after this, so this is great that he's on this. Laurie Cardill's in here. The audio commentary with Roger Avery. Disc 2 is The Many Days of the Dead. This is a great little featurette. It's 40 minutes. Tons of cool interviews and behind the scenes footage. And Of course, you have the behind the scenes that was on the Laserdisc, and the previous DVD is its own piece. We also on here have an interview with Richard Liberty, who played the Frankenstein character, who also you will recognize from the film The Crazies, which is another great Romero film that we will be talking about in the future. So yeah, this is the DVD to get, if you're going to get the DVD. Great stuff on here. A side note, I'm going to put out that there's a very nice expanded soundtrack CD available. There's a few different versions of, Dawn had many different discs that came out over the year. Day had, I believe, 2 or 3 different versions on CD. So it's John Harrison's music. John Harrison took a very different approach with this film as what I think most would have expected of a horror film. I think is another thing that many people clashed with beginning, originally seeing the film. It's light and almost calypso in nature, and the music harps on the concept of hope, and what, like the character John says when he's speaking to Sarah, is let's find an island and get out of here and start over. So the music will constantly remind you that there should be an island in our future. So, excellent choice. I love this, and I love the juxtaposition of the music. It's not scary horror music that you usually get. It's hopeful at many times. So, very different sound. Excellent. There's interviews with him talking about using the synths on it, which is great stuff. This edition, the limited edition here, I just want to check right here. This is the La La Land Records edition. Yes, La La Land Records. Great CD, 2-disc, good stuff. You'll notice that, like many of the movies we talk to, I do tend to have a lot of autographs. When it comes to Day of the Dead, like I said, this is my favorite, so it is plastered in autographs. I do believe my Blu-ray is the only thing I haven't bothered to get any, yeah, I don't have any autographs on the Blu-ray, believe it or not. So, this edition on Blu-ray is excellent. It's Scream Factory again, so Shout Factory, Scream Factory Collector's Edition series. Excellent transfer, amazing sound, beautiful picture, best edition you're going to find the film to date. You have most of the things that were back on that Laserdisc. You still see that behind the scenes footage, but you have 2 extras on here that are specific just to this edition that are well worth it. I mean, you're going to have the commentary tracks that were on the DVD, the previous DVD edition, the multi-person one, as well as the Roger Avery. They're good. I'm not going to say anything's wrong with them, so keep them. That's a great idea. So there's 2 features that are specific to this edition that are excellent. The first one is the shorter one of the 2, I should say, is about like 30 or 40 minutes, and it is a look at Wampum Mine Facility. Now Wampum, like I said, I mean, it is a true place. It's a real thing that they rented to make the film. And it really is an underground mine facility that is used for storage. You see down there like boats and campers and industrial storage, archival storage. There really is an archive of film reels down there of some of Hollywood films. It's one of the places throughout the country, I believe. I know that there's a similar place in California, but I think maybe there's a few more, judging by the fact there's 2, and the fact that one's in Pittsburgh, which is weird. Yeah, so Wampum is outside of Pittsburgh, but it is a documentary called Underground, which is a look at the mines, and they've been granted access to walk around Wampum facilities. It's Scott Goldberg Productions and Cult Magazine, I believe, leads you in the tour, and they show you the real mines, what they look like today. And they have an excellent interview with one of the employees who worked there at the time. And he talks about the experience of working in the mine in general. And then he talks about what it was like when they were making the movie. He was there. He got to see it. I know that there's instances where several of the employees and owners of the facilities got to come on one day and be a zombie. So there's a lot of interesting stories to go along with Wampum. Beautiful, beautiful piece. Now, the other thing on here that is excellent is a feature-length documentary called World's End, which is a look at the making of the film and kind of a look at its legacy. And it's interviews with the people who made the film, the actors, the crew. You have, like I mentioned, John Harrison, the composer. You have Pascal, the editor. And you have Romero talking about it. It's really great. If you're a Day fan like me, this is some of the best interviews ever given about the film. It's Red Shirt Productions. That's one thing that will be, and I think it's already come up on our Scream Factory reviews, is Red Shirt Productions are always great. That's the work of Michael Felcher. I definitely appreciate his work, and he is kind of the master fan who gets to talk about all of our favorite films. Speaking of master fan level, I am going to put a little shout out there for Day fans to check out if you really are a complete elite fan. Like if you are, if you know everything you think there is to know about this film, I'm going to recommend this book by Lee Carr. It's the making of George Romero's Day of the Dead. Came out a couple years ago on, this is what I'm trying to figure out here. There it is, Plexus Press. I bought mine on Amazon. Just looked it up, picked it up. Lee Carr, he is like the biggest fan of Day. He's got me beat. He tracked down not just the main actors, not just the cast and crew. He found extras who came in for the day to be zombies. He finds people who were there for scouting locations. He found owners of locations. He really talks to anyone and everyone you could think of. The detail in this book is pretty out there. I mean, I had used it kind of a bit of as a reference in the past. I actually sat down this summer and read it, and it took me months to get through this book. There is shooting schedule, and he literally goes through every day's shooting schedule and says exactly what they did that day, and he cross-references with multiple people to make sure it's true that this happened there and this happened then and that was the right day that this happened. He even disputes the famous Nicotero unplugged the refrigerator gut boy story as to when it happened. It's intense, but if you're a huge fan like me, totally worth it. Met Lee years ago at a horror convention. He's also shown up on Dawn of the Dead stuff too. So I think that's it for Day of the Dead. I'm gonna say that this is an important film, monumental in so many things that it does for future, as far as technically in filmmaking, especially in effects. I'm gonna say that it is a massive feat that was undertaken and an amazing film that came from it. I do recommend to get it in context. I would not say just go out there and watch Day of the Dead. I would definitely say watch these in order. Watch Night, watch Dawn, watch Day. See how things build and how much worse we are by the time we get to Day. And I think you'll appreciate it. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Horror Academic, and I just want to give a quick show note of sorts. So that's it on Day of the Dead. I highly recommend, need to own, need to watch, need to love Day of the Dead. So, hope you've appreciated and enjoyed this episode. And quick show notes. Horror Academic this year is part of #AllTheHorror, which is a kind of group that is bringing you horror content all month long for October. And we are part of that group. And you're going to be hearing, if you just follow AllTheHorror18 on Twitter, or the #AllTheHorror, you will see content from podcasts, from bloggers, from artists, writers, video folks like myself, and check it out all month long. There's going to be tons of stuff coming at you. And as our participation in all the horror this year. We will be teaming up with the Brook Reading Podcast, which is a literary podcast that looks at books every month. And I have actually been able to guest in the past in the discussion of Stephen King's Carrie. So what we are going to be doing is we're going to spend the month of October working with Brook Reading to look at Halloween, John Carpenter's classic, and the recent reboot? I don't know what we want to call it. Not a remake. It's a continuation. It's a sequel that destroys all the sequels before it. But we'll get into that more at the end of the month when we talk about Halloween 2018. But next month, we'll be talking about John Carpenter's classic, the original Halloween from 1978, with Melissa from the Brook Reading Podcast. I'll see you then. Bye.